All right. Hey, you guys, this is the lesson for quiz day one. So I'm going to give you a couple of sorry, it looks like chicken scratch because I'm using a stylus that I'm not used to. But for this quiz, the big things that we're going to talk about are lines, segments, rays, and angles, and then naming those things. So I'll give you kind of the basics for each. So a line is like this. It has an arrow on both sides, and then you can just pick a couple letters, whatever, A, B, C. To name it, what you're going to do is choose two letters. It doesn't matter which two. I'll just say A and B because why not? And then the way that you're going to tell a reader that it's a line is what you put over it. So you just put a little mini version of a line over it. It's going to have an arrow on both sides. So a line goes forever to the left and to the right, or to the up and down. It just goes forever in both directions. That's why the arrows are on both sides, because it just continues both ways. Then there is something called a segment. That is not a good color to see. All right. So a segment is like this, where it starts and stops at a certain spot. So we could say like PQR. And then again, to name a segment, you just pick any two letters that you want. So we could call it like QR, for example. And then to tell a reader or someone that's looking at work that it's a segment, what you're going to do is you're going to use just a little mini segment, no arrows on either side. With a segment, what happens is it starts and it stops. It does not continue in both directions. So that's the difference between a line and a segment. The last thing to talk about here is a ray. So a ray has direction. It's going to start somewhere and then continue in the other direction. So let's say we start here at D and then it goes this direction. Again, you can just pick two letters. But the key thing, one key thing, I suppose, is that this has to be one of the letters. So the starting point has to be one of them. So we'll say like D, G. And then the other thing that's really important is just like up here, how we had no arrows on either side, and this one we had arrows on both sides. For this one, notice that the arrow is over here on this side. What we have to do when we draw our little signifier on the top is we have to make sure that the arrow is above the G and that we basically have like nothing here on the end, because that's how it is in the picture. If we had it, if we wrote it like this, for example, what that would be a picture of is G on the end and then shooting through D. I say shooting through because I think of it like a bow and arrow. All right. And then the fourth and kind of last major thing for this particular lesson is just want blue, is an angle. So all of these have been just like singular lines, but an angle is going to be when two lines come together. So if we have this, P, T, Z, I don't know, I'm just picking random letters. There's a couple ways that we could name this angle. So the place where we could like catch water, or like the little, I guess the angle that's formed is right here. So one thing we could call this is we could call it angle T. We could also call it angle PTZ or angle ZTP. What I want you to notice is that the angle right here where the arch is, or the arc, whatever, that letter has to be in the middle. Okay? Because if we trace it ZTP, I don't know why this keeps coming up. Okay. whatever. So if we trace it like that, then it doesn't like the highlighter maybe. If we trace it Z to T to P, then we have drawn this image. But if we go like TPZ, I'll just do something different, TPZ, T to P to Z, we've created an angle elsewhere. Okay, so the order of the letters really does matter. And the other thing to note is if we ended up adding, so let's say we had this to start with, P, T, Z, and then let's say there were a couple other lines that were on here also. If we wanted to name, in this instance, let's say we wanted to name this angle right here, what we would have to do is, okay, we can't call this one angle T, because if I call it angle T, you guys wouldn't know if I mean this part, this part, this part, this part, this part. Like, you'd have no idea which part of T I'm talking about. So that will not work for this scenario. In this case, we need to label it using 3 letters where T is in the middle. So here we could go Z, T, M, or angle MTZ. And then also notice that this is the symbol for angle. It's just a little mini angle. So hopefully what you can see is all the symbology is basically just mini versions of whatever picture you're drawing. So here we have a line and it's a little mini line. Here we have a segment and it's a little mini segment. A ray, a little mini ray, and then an angle, and we got little mini angles right here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through and answer some questions that are similar to these. So I'll go through some examples with you. You can pause the video if you want, and then you can do your quiz. So here it says name the figure below in 2 different ways. Well, what I notice about this one is we have a solid dot and then an arrow, which means this is a ray. So we could call it PY with an arrow, or we could call it PW with an arrow. Number 2 says, name the figure below. Holy Hannah Montana, what's going on? In 2 different ways. So this one, we have an arrow and an arrow, which means this is a line. So we could call it line VL, or we could call it line LV, or VU, or UL. I'm just going to do it like this. And we just have to make sure that we have a little mini line on the top. Number 3, name the figure below in 2 different ways. So this one, notice you have a solid and a solid. That means this is a segment. So we can call it LA with a mini segment, or you could call it HA with a mini segment. You could call it LH. You could call it AH. You got all sorts of options. You just need to pick 2 letters. Number 4, name the figure in 2 different ways. So again, this one has a solid and an arrow. This would be a good one to pause the video and give it a shot. We could call it DM or DF. Just make sure that the arrow is not above the D. Number 5, here we have an arrow and an arrow. So you could pause the video here, give it a try. This is a line because there's arrows on both sides. So we would go AK, or we could call it AO, or we could call it KO or OK, all sorts of names. Okay, this is the one that if people are going to struggle, it's probably this one. So here, there's several different ways we could name this marked angle right here. One of them, because K, it's the only angle that's formed off of K, we could just call it angle K. We could also call it LKJ because then it creates that angle. Or you could call it angle JKL. Again, just making sure that K is in the middle. Okay, you could pause the video here, give this one a try. One way you could name it is angle X. Another would be to go from Y to X to W, or W to X to Y. Oopsie, sorry, I just said the same thing twice. I struggle with these letters for some reason. W and Y. All right, so we just flip those. Again, key thing being that X has to be in the middle. Here, you could give this one a try too. Go ahead and pause it if you want. But we could call this angle J. We could call it angle IJK. Or angle KJI. Key thing being that this has to be in the middle. This is called the vertex of the angle. The vertex. It's the corner that kind of gets drawn when you do an angle. All right, last one here. This is our vertex, so that's going to have to be in the middle. So we could call it angle D, or we could call it angle CDB, or angle BDC. In each of those, D is in the middle. All right, cool. You guys should be pretty well equipped to go take your quiz. It's called Quiz Day 1. And then, yeah, if there's anything that comes up, I'm happy to help.